You ready?
All right, welcome to Dry Dock Talk with the TSG. My name is Matt.
My name is Nathan, and we're very excited for this topic today. Matt actually doesn't know much about it all.
No, you've told me a little bit about it. You just said, I have a great idea for podcast and things I want to discuss. And I was like, oh, that's interesting, but...
Well, I have an
You haven't
interesting
told me anything.
idea. I don't know how well
Okay.
it's going to work for the podcast, so we're recording it, and if we like how it turns out, then we'll publish it. But
every time this podcast is just like, hey, let's talk about this. I don't know if it's going to work, but sure, let's talk about it.
perfect.
And if you don't like it, then let us know,
then we'll try to do something different.
and we'll not talk about it anymore.
Yeah.
Anyways.
So with that, I've had this thought,
Mhm.
this concept that I've been debating with, that I've been playing around with for a long while,
Okay.
regarding how we do things at the Space Center.
How do you mean? Like in what way? Like in simulation style, in operational style?
Yes, I mean yes.
Okay.
D, all of the
Everything.
above.
Yes. Okay.
And I can't answer that because I finally found an example and a phrase to kind of explain what I've been thinking about.
Okay.
And the phrase is framing the experience.
Framing the Space Center experience.
The Space Center experience,
Okay.
yes, your flight experience. And I don't mean like, all right, we're going to take your painting and put it in the nice little wooden outside lining. No, I mean like putting it into perspective and making it something for the crew based on that perspective that they have. Now, if that didn't make
Okay.
any sense to you at all,
Yeah. So putting what into perspective exactly? Like the
the
flight, or
the
just
flight,
the
the
entire
experience,
experience?
all of it, yes.
So as soon as they walk into the building, then they start getting this experience.
Yes, from that
And
moment.
It doesn't end until they walk out of the building.
I would say it doesn't even end then. It ends that night as they go to bed after they've gone out to dinner and talked about what just happened and what their thoughts and impressions
Okay.
were.
So this is an all-inclusive
So this is an
thing.
all-inclusive thing.
I'm curious now.
Now, to explain what I mean, and I'm going to use an example. This example is called Undertale. It's a cute little indie RPG game that was recommended to me. The person, my brother, I got back from an extended 2 years in Panama, and my brother said, hey, you have to check this out. And I said, okay, why? And he said, just do it.
Okay.
And so I said, okay, so why
I'm
don't you
gonna go
slide
ahead
on
and
over here?
move chairs. We're on the opposite side of the table, but
What we're going to do is we're going to just go through the first 5 minutes of this. Now, obviously, our viewers can't see what's going on,
Yeah.
so we're just going to have to kind of narrate it.
Okay.
And that's going to be
and
good enough.
we could probably just put in the audio or something like that.
I imagine.
in there,
Well,
but
I'm turned up the volume on my laptop, so
You know,
hopefully they'll be able to hear it.
copyright and whatnot.
There are no actual talking in it. It's all done through text boxes and
Okay.
dialogue like that, so you and I will just have to read it as it comes through.
Interesting.
But as I boot up this little game here, you can all hear that. Go ahead and start reading what it's saying.
Long ago, two races ruled over Earth, humans and monsters. One day, war broke out between the two races. Dramatic pause. After a long battle, the humans were victorious.
With dramatic pictures up top.
They sealed the monsters underground with a magic spell. Many years later, dot. Mount Ebbet, 21X.
There's a picture of a mountain there.
Legends say that those who climb the mountain never return.
There's a little boy or little girl. It's kind of gender neutral.
A child.
Little child. Look, there's a crevice. The child is looking at the crevice. Another picture. The child is catching its foot on a
Roots?
vine. Yeah, on roots
Okay.
or a vine of some
Yeah.
sort. And it's falling
Into the crevice?
into the crevice.
Okay.
Yeah. Ooh, face down in the dirt. All right. And a dramatic pan up on the image to reveal a dark and ominous looking cave. All right. So that's the little introductory video that we had to this. We're not going to go very far because when I first booted this up and looked at it after this first second or so, After I'd say about the first 3 minutes of Undertale, I was freaking out. I'm like, yes, this is
Oh, really?
exactly what I mean. So we're going to go ahead and pull this up to full screen.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay, it says press 2 or enter.
You can hear the music. So
Yeah,
what are your
hope
thoughts
so.
and impressions right now?
I feel like I'm playing the Game Boy.
Yeah, it's like the
You
Game
know.
Boy, like those old Pokemon games. It has some control things. Press these buttons to do things. And then the only other instruction is when HP is 0, you lose. All right, beginning game. We have to name the fallen human.
Ooh.
We're going to name it Matt.
Okay.
This is for Matt today.
I
M-A...
just wanted to name it like Greg,
Matt.
but I guess Matt will do.
Matt, yeah. This is like an old-fashioned style, like on the Game Boy, when you have to try to enter your name at the
Yeah.
beginning of Pokemon, and you have to
Yeah,
move
like-
it around
oh,
on
man,
the...
That's so annoying.
Yeah, that's what we just did. Is the name correct? Matt, is that your name?
M-A-T-T. Yeah.
All right, submitted.
Okay. Ooh.
Dramatic fade to white.
It's all pixelated.
Yes, and there's the graphics. You can't see it, but it's very Game Boy-esque.
Mm-hmm.
Very pixelated, very
Like Harvest Moon.
kind of like the classic Harvest Moon
Yeah,
stuff, I
yeah.
guess. You're just going to
I'm
describe what
kinda
you
like
see as I kind of
Chinese
walk
'cause
through
my
this.
eyes aren't open. But yeah, we were like on a flower bed, and now we're just gonna go down a hallway, I guess.
This is kind of like a
So-
top-down 2D view,
Yeah.
like the original Legend of Zelda.
Yeah, like Game Boy, like
yeah,
you say.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's very dark.
Okay.
There's a
so
passageway.
there's like a little doorway. Great. And then there's a flower in sunlight
It's
or
a
some sort of light.
smiley
and it's
flower.
smiling. It says, "Howdy, I'm Flowey. Flowey the flower. You're new to the underground." Well, yes, I am. Aren't ya? Yes. Golly, you must be so confused. Someone ought to teach you how things work around here. I guess little old me will have to do. Ready? Here we go. Whoa. Okay, see that heart? There's a heart on the screen. It says that is your soul, the very culmination of your being.
There's a little box in the center with this happy smiling sunflower above it and a little heart on the bottom. It
Yeah.
says LV1 below it, and HP is 20 out of 20.
Okay. Your soul starts off weak, but can grow strong if you gain a lot of LV or levels. What's LV stand for? Why, love, of course. Oh,
Not
bad.
levels, it's love.
Not levels.
Okay,
Love.
so note that.
You want some love, don't you? I think we all want love.
I do want love.
What is love? Don't worry, I'll share some with you.
Thanks, Mr. Sunflower. Ooh, he gave me a little wink.
And a tongue sticky out face. It says down here, love is shared through little white friendliness pellets.
And the top of the screen now has a bunch of little spinning friendliness pellets.
Are you ready? Oh man, I don't know if I'm ready for this. Move around and get as many as you can. Oh gosh.
It just has this really evil face as I hit
It
the
says,
pellet.
"You idiot. In this world, it's kill or be killed." Yeah, the flower is like super creepy.
The words are moving on
face.
the page, it's vibrating.
Why would anyone pass an opportunity like this? Exclamation point, question mark.
Whoa, and my box just shrunk, and now there's a big circle of those evil
And it
friendliness
says,
pellets.
"Die."
Ooh, that's really creepy laughter. Oh gosh, I'm gonna die.
What on earth? Oh, we got like all of our health back.
He looks startled, and there's a fireball that hit the flower.
Whoa. And then there's like a little goat magic thing. It says, "What a terrible creature, torturing such a poor, innocent youth. Ah, do not be afraid, my child. I am Toriel, caretaker of the ruins. I pass through this place every day to see if anyone has fallen down. You are the first human to come here in a long time. Come, I will guide you through the catacombs. This way."
And she walks off into the darkness.
And now we're following like this goat person
Into a mysterious doorway.
yeah.
Anyway, that is what I wanted to show you.
Okay, so how does this relate to
To the Space Center. All
and
right,
to
first
this
off, what
consummate
were
experience?
your impressions of what just happened? What were your thoughts about the
Just
sunflower?
Just about that whole experience?
About that whole experience.
Well, I thought it was interesting. Kind of threw me back into the old retro game days and
Yeah.
having fun with that. When did that game come out?
Recently, 2015, I think.
Okay, yeah, so it's relatively new. But I was like, oh, okay, cool. Fun old game, and then I thought it was like going through a tutorial or something like that. Like it was doing like,
Typical.
oh, LV is like love with happiness pellets and everything.
Ah,
And it
here's
was
the
like,
kind little flower guide. Take you through the thing.
yeah, exactly. And I was like, okay, it's kind of an interesting little game. And then we went from like 20 HP down to 1, and I was like, oh my gosh.
And the flower looked really creepy.
Yeah, like super creepy. And I was like, what the heck just happened? Like, what?
Yeah. And then it got really dark all of a sudden. Things like down here, it's kill or be killed. Die.
Yeah.
And evil laughter. Yeah. And then what are your impressions about this?
I don't know. I feel like, after the flower was like, die, I felt like, oh, the goat person, like, kind of didn't trust her.
Yeah.
Because I was like, well, if that was going to happen, my trust was just barely destroyed.
Oh,
How
yeah,
am I going to,
absolutely.
trust this person now? It's like, I'm going to guide you through the catacombs. Like, I'll stay here.
I'll tell you that the developers play off of that emotion, that distrust. I've played literally 5 minutes past this point that I showed you. Then I stopped because I was literally freaking out by all the different design things that they did in the experience. Just because I was so excited to share it with people. So I stopped, erased everything, and got ready to boot it up and show people again. But because they feed off of that distrust, and they do things and they design the music to, even though the words are appearing to be normal and friendly, but you still don't trust it. So what I'm hearing from you and what I interpreted this as is they took your expectation, they understood what expectations you were going into the experience with.
And maybe some of my reservations, like, oh, it's just like a little...
Yeah,
weird
this is a
game or
little
something.
pixelated 2D Game Boy-esque game.
Yeah.
And you went in with all of those expectations. Okay, we're going to go through the little tutorial thing. They're going to explain to us how all the stuff works and how we fight the enemies or whatever the case may be, right? They took your expectations, they turned them on their head just through that one interaction with the flower. Just that one moment, they immediately broke your expectations of the experience and made you distrustful of it.
Yeah.
Where before you're like, okay, yeah, well, yeah, happy flower thing. And then they showed you, one, this is a real world. More than just one level deep of, look, we're playing our little Game Boy game. But there's stuff going on here. You can't take everything at face value. And they also established the tone and what you expect from the rest of the experience.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm getting at with this?
So it's like, yeah, I can...
At least with regards to Undertale.
Yeah.
Now, first off, let me just say this is how I see and view and participate in all media. Like I can't play games or watch movies or read books without being like, oh, the design, the
music,
the music is doing this, or here's what they wanted. Oh, it's
the
terrible.
artistic license.
I love it.
Yeah.
But with regards to my thoughts about the Space Center, I figured this proved a very, very interesting and functional example of how in one short moment the experience was put into the context that the developers wanted us to have. You said you felt distrustful about the goat, bunny, rabbit looking thingy lady.
Magic.
Yeah,
mage
the
thing.
magic little thingy of whatever that sprite was. And on first glance, that looks like a friendly, nice little tour guide character from anything else. But you felt distrustful. And they knew that was their desired effect. So with the Space Center, we have people come to our experience with expectations. They come there, and we have the responsibility, or rather the opportunity, to frame that experience for the crew right at the get-go. How your mission starts, how your experience starts, is what determines how the rest of it is interpreted. So it's like,
I can see that.
yes, people will accept and work with whatever frame of reference you give them, whatever mindset you put them in. For instance, a couple of years ago, we flew the summer story in the Galileo was called Firestorm,
Mm-hmm.
where it has a very atypical briefing where you sit them down, you start briefing one mission, and in the background on the ship, the main view screen starts writing words on the screen.
Hmm.
It starts saying, don't listen to a word that I'm saying. It says something's not right. There's a group of people who don't want you to know the truth. If they find out that you know, they'll destroy you. And it's all of this very ominous, nervous making, that's not a real phrase, but you know what I'm trying to say,
Yeah.
text coming up behind you as kind of a second layer to the briefing. And the concept behind that is that, you have to be very, very careful who you trust. And it's one thing to say, guys, you have to be careful who you trust. And another thing entirely for that mission to show it to you, to put you in that frame of mind just by having the person talking and the words in the back saying something completely different. And in that moment in Firestorm, we put it in a frame. We put the crew in this secret spy, paranoid frame of mind.
Yeah, what's true, what's not.
Exactly. And that's how they approach the rest of the experience. I guess I could have just used that as my example. But Undertale made me so excited.
Well, and I can, relating this to something that I have, going through, for instance, Star Tours at Disneyland, or really just any ride, they don't just put you in a line until you get on the ride and experience the ride. In the line, you have, the things around you. You have animatronics that you can interact with. You have, even down to what you walk on is themed to what the ride is.
Yeah.
And you're literally going in being prepared or groomed to experience the ride in that mindset because of what you went through originally.
Yeah.
You got to see like the droids in for instance, Star Tours, you got to see the droids and see some of the stuff that they go through. There's a giant shuttle that they have there that you can look at. There's not too much, but they put you in that frame of mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So the discussion topic is, how do we do that at the Space Center? How do we do it well? How do we do it poorly? What is... because I think we can agree that it's important. It's very important. If you have a crew member who comes through knowing nothing about it, they're going to kind of be confused. But if they come through having their friends tell them how awesome it is, then they're going to have certain expectations and a certain viewpoint on it.
Well, and you can see this in birthday groups that come through. If it's a bunch of really rowdy boys, and you can see that in the lobby, in the cameras in the lobby, that they're just like talking and going crazy out there, then most flight directors go,
because already the crew has put the flight director in the frame of reference for the experience. Yeah.
Well, and for because then they know, the flight directors know that the crew is going to come on and just be super rowdy and probably not pay attention and just be difficult to work with. And then the flight director kind of, gives that expectation not anonymously, but non-verbally, just through the briefing and through their training experience like that.
Briefing and training, those are our first interactions really with the crew.
Well, I would say even just them stepping through the door and being in the lobby.
Valid.
And there's not much we can do because at least at the Central Elementary, it's a school.
With the locations I've seen, it's always some other building with a space center inside of it.
Exactly. So there's not too much. But I would imagine that you could at least do that by being professional at the beginning.
Absolutely.
And not just sitting with others and like talking it up with your friend at the Space Center or something like that, because that kind of is slightly unprofessional.
Very much.
I'm not sure if this is really what you're going through, but
no, it's part of it,
but this
absolutely.
is But being able to address them very professionally and say, "Hello, welcome to the Space Center. My name is so and so. What ship are you here on for today? That one? Great. Let me go get your flight director. Please take a seat and wait quietly while we do that."
Yeah, absolutely.
And maybe, I know in the old days there was like fish and some other like old relics, like models of Bill Schuler's and Mark Damonts, I think. In the
display
front.
case on
and
front.
So you could be like, "Oh yeah, look at these, space." So maybe there does need to be something similar to that, space reference type material that as they're waiting, they can at least look at or learn from or watch. Like that, we have the TV there. They could
exactly
do that.
Yeah, and as part of that as the flight director, that is your moment to establish your authority,
Mm-hmm.
especially
Yeah,
as
yeah.
with a group of 12-year-olds. Then you need to be very clear who's in charge, who's calling the shots, and who they
Mm-hmm.
need to listen to. Otherwise, you're going to lose control of the group, and it's going to be absolutely chaotic.
Absolutely.
With older groups, you've got to appear knowledgeable, like you know what's going on, professional, like you said beforehand, so they will respect you. Even though you may be a whole lot younger than they
Oh,
are,
yeah.
they need to recognize, again, your authority on the situation and be willing to agree with what you say.
Yeah.
First references, you take them down to the bathrooms, you load them up into the briefing room, you explain to them the universe. And I think here's where I think we need to be very deliberate about how we present the experience we're about to give them. With it, and this is where it gets to be something a little bit more convoluted. I'm going to ask you a question. Matt, what is the experience someone is going to get once the ship starts?
When the simulation starts?
Yes, once the simulation starts. Thank you.
I think it depends on the flight director. Because
Okay.
some flight directors make loading a huge, like grandiose, I guess you could say, experience where they really try to key in on that wonder, like, whoa, we're inside of a spaceship.
Yeah.
Whereas some others just kind of put them in there and say, okay, here we are. And I think that's reflective also in the way that they start up. There are some flight directors which, all right, when you hear the music, okay, it's beginning, so then they just start the music, just push their slider up, and then they wait for the crew to react. Because they told them, like, oh, yeah, when the music starts, make the main computer come online. There are others that they let the kids know that the simulation is starting because of a, and a big dramatic main computer
just automatically
online.
starts up. Let's
Yeah.
hone in on that moment right there. You have, when the music starts, tell the main computer to come on, and it just turns on by itself. What is the difference in context of framing the experience that the crew's about to have between those 2 points?
Going at face value right there, I would say that, one, it shows the kids that, when they have to tell the main computer to turn on, shows the kids that they have to make the decisions,
Yeah.
that they're in control.
That is dependent on them, is what I'd add.
And then with the main computer just turning on, then it makes them more of like backseat drivers or kind of type of a thing. They just kind of sit and watch the simulation unfold in front of them. Kind of like a choose your own adventure where it tells you a story and then you make a decision and then it tells you the story again based on that decision. You're not really making
You're
your
not
own
driving
story.
the story, you're just
Yeah.
pointing the direction that it goes.
Exactly.
And I would agree with you on the difference between those two approaches. Is one better than the other? That's a personal interpretation
It
point.
probably depends on the mission.
And it depends on the mission, it depends on the crew, but we're very rarely conscious of what we're saying with such things. I personally am a big fan of, all right, you guys turn the computer on, and not just out of tradition, but because I say, no, I want them to realize that this is responding to you, that they're the driving force in this, and that I, as the flight director, should not be flying the ship. A lot of times, sometimes we breach into that territory a little bit of, okay, who's really flying the ship? The flight director. They're just using the other people to push the buttons. Does that make sense? And I think that, go for it.
That goes into like a question of mine. So if the flight directors aren't the one flying the ship, it's the crew, the flight director tells the story, right? So that technically means that the crew, if they're the ones flying the ship, they should be making all the decisions, right?
Yeah.
And then, I guess this is like D&D, like Dungeons and Dragons, where the flight director is simply the dungeon master. The story is told through the characters, through the crew, through the people on the bridge. And the flight director just tells the
consequences,
the
the reactions of the people around them,
and sets up the next
scene.
Yeah.
That's how I approach it. I am a big fan of tabletop RPGs, and I've been the dedicated dungeon master since I was 12. So it's been a long time.
That's a lot.
Going from that into flight directing means that I fly very differently than other people. With that, it's Here's an example. In the Magellan, we were flying a mission where there's an explosive on their ship. And that it's in the area very close to the crew. They managed to get it, and the goal is for them to then get the explosive off of the ship before it detonates. And they were sitting around trying to figure out, okay, how do we get this thing off? And one of the kids says, let's launch it in a shuttle. Let's put it in a shuttle and launch it off. Now, normally we hear people mention transporters. I looked at that and said, shuttle would work just fine too. It takes just as long to run it to the shuttle as it does to run it down to the transporter room. Absolutely. So I said, all right, good. Let's let them launch the shuttle. But while the explosive device was still in their hands, the kid launched the shuttle.
Oh, no.
And then it runs off down onto down to the lower decks to be placed on the other shuttle. So the supervisors loaded the thing up onto the other shuttle, and I was trying my best to make it very clear. Okay, the bomb is still on our ship. It's on the other shuttle. You launched the shuttle too early. And they didn't catch it. They didn't catch it at all. They were doing it. One kid was like, guys, did we get that shuttle launched? And they turned to the kid who's in charge of it.
Like, yeah.
He's like, yeah, I launched it. And I'm like, guys, no, it's in the other shuttle. The one you didn't actually get the thing off. The confusion was not resolved before the timer counted down to 0. And in that moment, normally what happens if you don't get the bomb off of your ship, at least traditionally what I've seen, is, all right, you shut off the ship, it counts as a strike, your ship's been blown up, and you're done. Or they fudge it enough to have it get out somewhere depending on how much time that you have, right? Normally, if they fail something, you start it down, you make them try it again, you help them figure out what went wrong, and then you get going again. But if you don't have time, lots of times the flight directors will just fudge the numbers, essentially, to keep the story moving.
Yeah.
I chose in this moment to pick answer C, none of the above. And that G4 explosive went off, destroying decks 15, 16, and 17.
In the Magellan.
And the Magellan, which has all the different floors on it. Because realistically, would it cause their whole ship to explode? No. It's not. They looted it from a weapons locker. Why would you have ship destroying explosives that your security officers haul around? I mean,
the point was just to destroy the command crew.
To blow up the command crew. And probably even 3 decks was a little too much, but either way. And
big explosives.
Big explosives, exactly. With that, then I took the life form count and dropped it by 50. And then started playing some alarms that they had to seal off the other decks because now there were hull breaches. And I kept clicking that number to go down until they got the door sealed. And the mission continued. We didn't lose time in the flight. But my supervisor looking at me was just shocked.
Like, what are you doing?
What are you doing? And I was like, that's terrible. I'm like, they didn't get the bomb off of their ship.
Yeah.
And we responded to how they acted. And that was a bit later in the mission. But I paid very close attention to then how they handled the rest of the flight. And they handled it a little bit differently than other crews. Because they realized that there were direct consequences to their actions. They realized that, okay, if I don't do my job correctly, it's not going to work. And maybe it's not going to be an immediate mission failure because now we can't complete our mission.
Yeah.
But there are going to be consequences. At one point, towards the end of the flight, they had to call down to deck 15 or 16 to turn something back on. One of the last steps on the damage report was call deck 16 and tell them to turn the thingy back on. And when they called, the supervisor looked over me and said, they're trying to call deck 16. And I'm like, yeah, and? Like, you blew up deck 16. I'm like, oh. I'm like, well, don't answer it then.
Yeah.
Like, but they can't finish the thing. I'm like, we'll explain that to them and move on. And so we called up to the damage control team and we said, hey, unfortunately, we can't turn the thing back on because that room is gone. And they're like, what? Why is it gone? We're like, because we didn't get the bomb off of our ship.
And they're like,
Oh, and that was an hour later in the flight. And so the flight then was more cohesive. It was their decisions and their actions mattered in a way that wasn't creating branching storylines with all kinds of crazy different development that we needed to do.
And doesn't just like make them strictly follow one storyline where, oh, they didn't do it right, so then we cancel the mission and restart.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I'm sure, like you said, taking it out of the Space Center even afterwards, you know, they're going to be talking about that and they're going to be thinking where if we don't do it right, there are consequences to this that we will not see for, you know, in this case, an hour more or even days farther down. Is that your consequences or your actions have very legitimate consequences
Very
that
much so.
affect you all the way through.
And I think that, and I bring this all up because it's not something that I see terribly often when I'm in and around the Space Center. We have a very binary, do they pass, do they fail?
Yeah.
And there's no middle ground. And I think especially with previous conversations about trying to make things more realistic, more simulator-like, there needs to be middle ground.
Well, and like it's not in life. It's like, okay, well, like in school, you don't pass and fail. Like, yeah, that does occur, but there is a big range of passing and a big range of failing.
Yeah,
So you
absolutely.
could pass, but get like a C minus or something, and you're like, okay, yeah, great, I passed. I'm so glad that that's done, but it was not a good pass.
And 2 comments on that is, 1, flying like this and having this attitude about your flight increases their options in reality
It does.
without increasing development time. If we talk about writing big branching missions where they have all kinds of crazy choices and then the paths will split, those are really, really hard to do.
They are.
Because there's so much extra development that will not be used.
Yeah, because half the time they will always make this decision, or like most of the time they'll always make this decision. So then all of that other branch of the story
is never explored or rarely explored, and then can it really justify the extra developmental pain that goes into it to make it?
Yeah.
And the answer is always debatable. But flying like this allows you to have, more certain story points, but with a wide variety of outcomes. And the other point with that is tying this back into the framing of the experience, is that we very rarely put the crews in the mindset that this is how things are going to be. Does that make sense?
It's more of just like, oh yeah, you're in a spaceship. You're
It's
gonna
like
get
a-
the story told to
A
you.
3D
and it
movie
happens.
that's even cooler than 3D glasses,
Yeah.
And they don't necessarily express that. They don't necessarily say, yeah, I just expect it to the thing. They may have a nice little illusion of my choices matter. But when it comes down to it, once we start really feeding them what the correct answer is, or once we start fudging things, we're doing the crew a disservice. And we're undercutting that truly limitless opportunity we claim to give them.
Well, and it's like, when teaching, for example, it's like, all right, does anybody know who the first president of the United States was? And if they're not getting it after 30 seconds and you say, hey, wasn't his name like George or something?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, what point are you giving me, by asking that question and then giving me the answer? Like, that doesn't really make much sense.
Have you done an escape room before?
Yes.
So how would you feel if the escape room attendant came in after a few minutes and was like, all right, here's how you do it, guys?
Yeah. And like, granted, if we are super, super struggling, then yeah, they might give us a small hint,
And it
but
can be
that comes with a time
appreciated.
penalty.
Yeah.
But, if we're really, really struggling, but most of the time,
And there's a difference between helping someone out and, all right, here's what the right answer is.
yeah, and there's a very big opportunity for us to fail.
Yeah. And with that, and have you ever failed an escape room?
I think I went through 2, and I think we got them both times.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So-
but imagine if you had
but it
failed
was
an
like,
escape room.
At 58 minutes or something like that.
Really
so it was just like
close.
super close to being finished.
Wow. I've never done an escape room. I've just had people tell me about them, which is why I ask you. But I imagine, I hope my brother forgives me for mentioning this. My brother got a ticket one evening and he came home all upset about it. And we're like, come on, man, why are you upset? And he's like, no, I'm upset because I didn't deserve it, is what he said. He said, if I had actually done this traffic violation and deserved it, I wouldn't be mad. I would have nothing to complain about.
Yeah.
He says, but because I didn't deserve it, that's why I'm mad. And that's all he explained about it. And I think that we can get away with, I think that we should kill our crews more often. When they deserve it, we should fail the crew.
And not just out of spite because
Spite
they
is
were super
never
annoying
good.
crew, so I'm just going to kill them anyways.
No, not at all. That's terrible. Absolutely not. But
So you're saying like a perfectly good crew that we had a super fun time with, we should fail them.
well, not just let's fail them just to fail them.
well,
But if they deserve it,
Yeah, a very valid reason for failing is like, well, you guys, you did a super, super good job.
you were doing
as
well,
good as you could, but
but
you just didn't quite do it in time.
at least, and this is, and again, extrapolation. I've never been in that and there's always leeway.
Yeah.
There is a very large gray area with it.
Mm-hmm.
Especially taking into account equipment failures, staff failures, complexity, whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that we don't put crews in the mindset to have them take it as an open experience. We tell them there is a right answer, and they try to find a right answer. And if they can't find the right answer, they give up and throw their hands in the air.
Yeah.
I think back to stories that Vic would tell, where they would spend an entire camp trying to undock. Just trying to launch from dry dock or Starbase 12 or whatever they were trying to do. And they died over and over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
And the kids left pleased with the experience. They weren't all angry and throwing the thing in the air.
We didn't do anything. It's
Yeah.
like, well,
No, they were like, we didn't get it that time. What do we need to do differently? Now, there is a difference between 1990 and today. The people that are coming through are very different cultures. But looking at it in context of framing the experience, Vic had framed for them the experience at the beginning, the first time that they died, that, okay, you guys have to do this right. And if you don't, you're not going to get very far.
like, you think space is easy?
No.
No, not by any means.
Not at all. So when we have problems, when our crews struggle with something, when it takes them forever and a half to get moving, one of the worst things I feel like we can do is just fudge it so they get through anyway.
Well, and I think if they are having a hard time, getting started, you just need to have set that expectation previous, and not by like forcing it down their throat in briefing, but and obviously I don't have these things directly on mind, but being able to non-verbally or very small verbally emphasize that point that no, what you guys do matters.
I think the best way to do that, apart from the things we've already discussed about your tone as you're briefing the crew, your seriousness, how you present it, how you answer their questions, killing them, shutting everything off and giving them a strike, is the single best way to create that expectation in their minds, to put them in that frame of reference for the rest of the experience.
And then give them death time?
Ooh, you want to talk about death time, Matt? Because we
Probably
can
not
talk
right
about
now.
death time. I have very strong feelings. No, death time. We'll talk about death time at least briefly then.
Okay.
Because, and this is going to polarize a lot of people, but if you're, were you about to say something?
I'll say that, when you give them death time, there's a certain extent that, like you said, setting the mood and setting the expectation. You give them death time and then play some super silly, non-related song at all, and it's like, oh great, you just took that completely out of their expectation.
Another problem with it is it's a punishment.
Mm-hmm.
The punishment enough, at least nowadays, is okay. You screwed up. Here are the consequences of your actions. You're done.
Mm-hmm.
And then to add insult to injury of saying, all right, now we're going to sit around for 5 minutes and waste the time that you paid for and my valuable time for getting you through the flight.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems a little ridiculous to me personally. And I'm going to try to be very careful in my strong opinions about the subject because I know of the prevalence of the ideas. But
Well, I do think that there is, to some extent,
value in death time.
in death time, because maybe they really just aren't getting it and they just do not understand. And I think it's important to take time, maybe even as a flight director, to have a second briefing sometimes, being able to have them discuss it among themselves for a little bit. Say, okay, how's it doing? And maybe as a flight director, run them through it a little bit. Say, okay, so you did this and then this and then this, but then this happened, so how do we adjust?
That's actually what I've been doing recently whenever I have crews die. I'll stop the mission. I'll say, all right, what went wrong?
Will you go up on the bridge? Or
sometimes.
Okay.
If they're really struggling, I will just say, I'm going to be up to talk to you guys. For instance, I had a crew where their problem was there was no communication. The information that they were going to crash did not get from sensors to the captain to helm. They weren't communicating. I said, why did you guys crash? They were like, well, because we didn't know it was coming. And I'm like, well, why didn't you know it was coming? They're like, well, because Josh didn't tell us, or whatever the kid's name was. And Josh was like, I read the thing out loud. And then they all start yelling and arguing over whose fault it was. So I said, all right, I'm going to come up in a second. And I went up, I sat them all down on the bridge, and I said, okay, why did the information not get from Josh to there? Like, well, because we didn't hear him say it. I'm like, okay.
Okay, so whose fault
So
is
there's
that?
a problem.
Yeah.
So, and then we talked about it. We figured out where the communication was breaking down. We analyzed what was happening on their bridge, who wasn't doing their job correctly, who was doing everyone else's jobs and not their own, or whatever the case was. And the problem was done.
Then you never had any other issues with that throughout
Not
the mission?
with that. I didn't have to struggle with this incredibly rowdy crew not being able to communicate correctly for the rest of the flight. Because we took the time to sit down and say, here's what your problem is. Here's why everything is shut off right now. Would you guys like to try again? They're like, yes. And so we tried it again. And they felt, at least my reactions when they stopped their ship, I imagined it was a little bit more of a satisfying stopping the ship than just, okay, we're there.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? And the problem was fixed. With death time, it's not always necessary to have the flight director go up and sit down and talk with you through the problem. A lot of the times it's they didn't come up with a solution. So you say, would you
They
guys...
didn't have enough time to
They didn't have enough time. They were not familiar enough with what tools they have. So it's, hey, would you guys like a few minutes before we get things started up again to strategize? And they say, yes, absolutely. You're like, all right, take this time when there's not alarms, when there's not loud music, where there's not the crazy lights going all over the place.
Maybe you play, a little bit of
You could play something fun in the background. Sure,
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with
yo
that.
ho yo ho, Pirates
But
Like Me, or something like
The
if they're killed
focus
by
of the
pirates.
time is not for them to listen to a silly song, but rather for them to strategize, to figure out what went wrong, to find solutions. And the second that they've got a solution, you turn off the song and you get it started back up again.
And it's not even solutions to what problem they're confronting, but also solutions between themselves. Because,
yeah.
like you said, there was just an issue between an interpersonal issue, not an issue with the mission. Like, that was a very simple part. Just like, okay, we're here, stop the ship. That's very simple. But they were having a big issue between communication. And those are some things that needs to be addressed. That the Space Center has been so valuable in teaching people from the beginning.
And when we start coddling our crews and fudging things, or here, let's play 2 minutes of really loud alarms to make sure they know that they're about to crash, we're missing out on that wonderful, wonderful learning and teaching opportunity. And you can kill them multiple times for the same thing. For instance, they're trying to find a solution to a problem. They don't find a solution and time runs up, so they fail. You stop, you talk to them, they come up with another solution. And there's always the risk of, okay, they're just going to keep debating ideas and never get anywhere. So at some point, you as a flight director, and you say, all right, guys, we need to get started again. Do you have a plan? They're like, let's try this. And even if it's not the right answer, even if it's not even a remotely good answer, you can let them try it.
Yeah.
Let them see the consequences. Okay, we tried this and that didn't work.
And
So
maybe as a flight director, it's like, it's not a great plan, but sure, it works. Like putting the bomb on a shuttle.
yeah,
Great.
that works
it's a lot
fine.
easier to put it on a transporter and just transport it out there. But, because the shuttle, you lose something. But you know what? It's a plan.
All right.
It's not very good.
And if it's good enough, it'll work.
Yep.
Or if it's really not good enough, then great, they die again. But this time they have new knowledge. Okay, so maybe our tractor beam, we can't tractor beam the bomb out into space, guys. It doesn't work. But now we, A, know how to tractor beam works, and B, have eliminated something from the list, and can now, all right, guys, now what else can we do? And
That makes sense.
so death time and dying is a wonderful way, and one of the most important ways that we can make the experience meaningful for people. And in the original context of our discussion, death time and dying is a fantastic way to either put them in or snap them back into the frame of reference that you want for things to be for your flight.
Yeah, we will definitely have to have a larger discussion about death time later.
Oh, yes.
So,
Oh, yes. I hit
That's good.
my favorite ranting points about it
yeah.
all. But
Okay, that's good.
well, thanks, Matt, for being willing to hear me out. We went from evil sunflowers to death time.
Yeah.
But I think that if we pay more attention to how we present the experience and what we expect
Every aspect.
in
of
every
the
aspect,
simulator.
and what we expect the crews to do and what the crews expect from it, we'll be able to make it a much more educational, much more meaningful, and much more entertaining
Yeah.
experience all the way across the board.
That's good.
Well, thank you
I
all.
love to hear your thoughts. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks everyone else for hearing my thoughts as well as Matt and I talked about this topic here.
Great. Well, thank you very much for listening to Dry Dock Talk. And as always, if you have any comments or questions, go ahead and give us a comment at drydocktalk@gmail.com. We'll be sure to read those and comment about them. Make fun of you. No, just kidding. But certainly, if we think your comment's interesting, we'd love to talk to you more about it on one of our podcasts.
Wonderful. Thank you all, and may the force be with you.